What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for this breaking edition episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast out of One Bills Drive. In case you don't know, you know now. You should know that, judging by the headline of this podcast, the Buffalo Bills have extended defensive tackle Ed Oliver. The deal just broke. The deal was just released by, of course, you guessed it, Adam Schefter. As Adam Schefter tweets that the Buffalo Bills and Ed Oliver have reached a agreement that is a 4-year deal worth $68 million, $45 million of that $68 million guaranteed. And Oliver had 1 year left on his contract and is now tied to the Buffalo Bills for the next 5 seasons. And breaking this down, of course, is never easy because a lot of Bills fans, myself included, believed that Ed Oliver would be as good as gone. And that was due to, well, not as good as gone, but this was the prove it year for Ed Oliver to show up and prove his worth. And the Buffalo Bills said, no, we want to keep you here prior to you proving in your contract year whether you're worth it or not, and risk losing you, risk you going to another team. And this is a interesting moment in the Buffalo Bills franchise, one that I did not anticipate today happening. There was never any inkling that the Bills were looking to get this done. This looked like something that they would be patient with and try to see if Ed Oliver could perform at that level that he needed to perform at in order for the team to know whether or not he is deserving of an extension. But the Buffalo Bills extend Ed Oliver a 4-year deal, breaking it down, $68 million in total, 45 of which is guaranteed, tying Ed Oliver to the Buffalo Bills for the next 5 seasons, this year being the last of his rookie contract. And then the new contract kicks in, obviously, in the aftermath of this of the last year of his deal. So big news out of One Bills Drive. My thoughts on it, you know what? In terms of this, the Bills brass, they love to draft, develop, and retain. That seems like that's the motto for Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. And yet they were able to do that this time around. They weren't able to do that with Tremaine Edmunds. And maybe the fallout from that situation is what allowed the Bills brass to kind of come to this conclusion that Ed Oliver would be better off retained prior to seeing it through with him on the last year of his contract. And the benefit of this deal is, to my estimation, the benefit to this deal is that it does not impact the Buffalo Bills and their salary cap this season. It only impacts the Buffalo Bills starting in 2024. He's still got that last year on his contract for his rookie deal. And then every year after that, we will see him obviously see the improvement in his pay structure, obviously, with this new contract. So the one thing I throw out there as well is that defensive coordinator contracts are defensive tackle contracts are extremely hard to decipher right now. And each position, whether it's the quarterback position, the wide receiver position, the defensive tackle position, the market for those positions has all been drastically changed based on what other teams have done. I've talked about this a lot on the show with Deshaun Watson's contract that the Browns gave him affecting Lamar Jackson, Odell Beckham Jr.'s contract given to him by the Baltimore Ravens, affecting the contract demands of one DeAndre Hopkins. And as well, at the defensive tackle position, Aaron Donald's contract kind of affecting the future of that position, the defensive tackle position, of course. So Ed Oliver getting paid what he felt was essentially his worth. What does it amount to guaranteed? It's $10 million a year for a defensive tackle that the Bills are banking on. And let's be honest, I'll be honest, in terms of what we've seen from Ed Oliver as a Buffalo Bill, for a former 9th overall draft choice to kind of be on the fringe as far as whether or not he should or should not get an extension on his rookie contract, I think that tells you all you need to know in terms of what we expect from Ed Oliver as that top 10 pick that he was. And we just have not seen the return on investment as far as him being a dominant defensive tackle in this league. I think he's a good defensive tackle. He's certainly not great. And the Bills are banking on him to become great with a contract like this, and want him to stay within the team, within the roster, and within the organization. So I always like the thought process that they have in terms of, keeping guys around and trying to keep guys consistent and keeping guys here for the long haul that they've drafted in terms of developing them, retaining them. I get that. But this was a move that I did not see coming. I thought that this would be a year where Ed Oliver would have to prove his worth, prove that he was worthy of an extension. And the fact that he got it before he was actually given the task of proving it, to me is interesting. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'll just say that it's interesting. I want your guys' thoughts. You can throw down some comments in the comment section below here, of course, as always, on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and give me your take on this news that Ed Oliver is extended, of course, by the Buffalo Bills, and we're keeping him around. That this was a move that I did not anticipate whatsoever. I'm not going to say I like it. I'm not going to say I hate it. I'm going to say I understand it. I understand it in terms of the way the position has kind of flowed. These teams do kind of have to follow the lead of others based on the position that they're discussing, and that position being the defensive tackle position. Aaron Donald's contract changed the position of D tackle. Obviously, I think DeAndre Hopkins is the next topic that I want to kind of dive into real quick here. The D-Hop sweepstakes and everything that I've heard in regards to that, obviously, is something that I want to dive into here. So Ed Oliver here in Buffalo, how does their cap situation look next year with that contract? We'll find out. Maybe some guys will be, obviously given the task of moving on from the Bills based on this contract, but maybe we'll see. That's just something to throw out there. But in terms of DeAndre Hopkins, I haven't talked about this yet since he was released. I hosted a Twitter space on Wednesday where I had viewers and listeners of the podcast join me on Twitter, and you guys can do that every Wednesday night at 8 at Ryan Thomas Take. You can hop on my Twitter as I'll be live on Twitter at 8 o'clock on Wednesday nights, so that I can chat with you guys, get your thoughts. You can ask me some questions. It's just a really cool way of being interactive with the viewers and listeners of this show as I try to grow this show and make it better and come up with new ways to make it different constantly. That's what I really enjoy doing, is making things as fun and as original as possible with this show. But I talked to a few followers of mine last week, and a lot of them want DeAndre Hopkins. I put a poll out there on my Twitter, as well as I like to do, and about 57% of Bills fans not only want the Bills to kick the tires again on Matt Araiza, that's another topic for another day, but they believe that about 62% want DeAndre Hopkins. So, how does that look? And let's just look at it this way. In terms of what I talked about with these followers on Wednesday, listen, I think if you're a team that needs another wide receiver, it's a no-brainer that you should go out and get DeAndre Hopkins. But with the addition of Dalton Kincaid, with the additions of Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield, there's only one football in comparison to the guys that are already on the roster, as well as the new guys that are on the roster, especially with the Bills cap situation not being what would be one that would allow what apparently D-Hop is looking for in a contract that's very similar to the one that Odell Beckham Jr. got with the Baltimore Ravens. And to provide perspective on that, it's a one-year deal worth up to $18 million. Do I think Odell Beckham is worth that contract? Absolutely not. Do I think DeAndre Hopkins is more worthy of a contract like that? Yes. Do I think that DeAndre Hopkins should get a contract like that? No. You see how I broke that down? DeAndre is more worthy of a contract like that, but does he actually deserve it? Should he get it? No, not in my humble opinion. So if that's the type of contract, if the reports are true that that's the type of contract that DeAndre Hopkins is looking for, then he's not coming to Buffalo. Furthermore, he might not even go to a winner. He might be going to a team that is kind of on the bubble, maybe like a Detroit Lions, who I've heard are very interested in him, as well as the Cleveland Browns, who I've heard as well are very interested in him. So, all the talk that, I want to go to a contender, whether it's the Chiefs, whether it's the Bills, I want to go to a contender. Well, if you price yourself out, you're not going to a contender. Contenders already have players that they're paying money to, Buffalo and Kansas City being one of them. And that's not going to happen. So all the rumors are that, DeAndre Hopkins is a player that, could go to KC, could go to Buffalo. Those are the top two teams, trying to vie for his services. And I don't think that it makes a lot of sense really at this point for either team unless DeAndre Hopkins takes less money. And I don't quite know if he's willing to do that. It really comes down to what is his preference, money or being on a team that could possibly win him a championship and being on a team that would obviously allow him the opportunity to have a greater portion or maybe the greatest portion of his career. Because when I take a look at DeAndre Hopkins, I do see a talented receiver. I do see one of my favorite receivers of the last 10 years. But I also see a receiver that is 30, 31 years old that's wasted or had his talent, his prime, wasted based upon the teams that he's played for and the situations that he's played in. Whether it's Houston with the influx of quarterbacks, revolving door of quarterbacks until Watson got there, and then we know what happened with that era with the Houston Texans. And then the whole situation with obviously the Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray. If you're as big a fan of HBO Hard Knocks as I am, you would see that Kyler Murray is a ticking time bomb and that the shelf life on his career is just as short as he is. And I say that in a literal but sarcastic, joking way. I don't see Kyler Murray being in this league much longer. With everything that we know about him, as well as his work ethic and things of that nature, and his willingness to kind of call out his teammates, DeAndre Hopkins being one of them. So that was a volatile situation. That was a situation that was never going to get better. It was only going to get worse. And the Cardinals did right by DeAndre Hopkins by cutting him, understanding that, we're not going to get anything for this guy, but we're doing right by him because during his experience here, he's done a lot of things right for us, and we didn't necessarily do right by him. So I also want to acknowledge the sentiments of, Chopin Bulldog. I was listening to the show the other day, and they were talking about DeAndre Hopkins, and they started to kind of go back and forth about the prospects of adding DeAndre Hopkins for the sole circumstances in which if you add DeAndre Hopkins, it means he's not playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, which I understand where they're coming from in that respect. You're trying to chase and get past the Kansas City Chiefs, but you shouldn't make moves based on other teams and what they're doing. I think that you should look at your team singularly in the sense that how does DeAndre Hopkins help the Buffalo Bills? Does he help the Buffalo Bills? Can he help the Buffalo Bills move closer to a Super Bowl appearance and championship, of course? And if all those answers to those questions are yes, and if the dollars and cents are right, then obviously it's a no-brainer. But if there's a maybe or a no to that question, to those questions, then if another team wants to go out and pay him what he feels like he's worth, so be it. Doesn't matter. If the Chiefs go out and get him, whatever. I know the Chiefs had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. They won a Super Bowl. The Chiefs had just Travis Kelce as a premier pass-catching weapon, and they won the Super Bowl. So they're still the team to be. No matter who they got on their team, as long as they got Pat Mahomes, they'll always be the team to be. There's no Pat Mahomes available. He's on the Chiefs already. You see my point? There's really nothing that can happen that can change the pecking order of that. And I never think to myself, if I was in the general manager's seat, I have to make this move to prevent another team from making it. I don't think GMs in the National Football League really think that way, nor should they think that way. So with all that being said, do I think that they'll go out and get him? If I put it to you this way, in terms of D Hop, right? I would say to you guys and gals out there that if D Hop is, or if D Hop's been available for as long as he has, um, would this be the moment to go get him? If it hasn't happened yet, if it hasn't happened now, it should have happened already. And if it hasn't happened already, it's not going to happen now. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here. In terms of if it hasn't happened now, I don't think it's going to happen. And maybe some things are going to be finagled by Brandon Beane in the next few days, and voila, he's on the team, and I'm wrong, and that's fine. But those things, the ability for teams to do that, that is unforeseen. You know, most of us don't even really understand and comprehend that. Most of the average fans in the league don't really buy into any of that. Most of the fans in the Buffalo Bills stratosphere, Bills Mafia, they don't want the Bills to continue to restructure contracts because it's essentially pouring gasoline on a low lit fire only for it to be engulfed in whatever, flames and all that stuff. You're literally just delaying the inevitable downslide that teams go on. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. And potentially with this type of restructuring that's already happened with the Bills, I fear when that all comes to its ugly head and that comes back to bite the Bills in the butt. It will happen. It's just a matter of when. And Brandon Beane even spoke to that the more you ask players to restructure, the more you ask players to do X, Y, and Z, the worse it's actually going to get for when those contracts are done. That's when you're kind of behind the eight ball once again and trying to do what Brandon Beane did the first time around with the Buffalo Bills in his first season, where he cleared a lot of cap space, kind of took a light approach to bringing in new talent because he couldn't bring in new talent. And that might be the case in like 3-4 years from now. So DeAndre Hopkins is a player that I really like. There's no doubt about it. He's a player that I've always enjoyed in this league, but I'm fully for them bringing him in. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not, but there are a lot of layers to this, far more than as simple as, oh, he's a great player, sign him. It's not that simple. And if it was, he wouldn't be a free agent right now. And that goes for the other 31 teams in the National Football League that want him. Feel like 30 teams in the National Football, 30 teams in the National Football League, because obviously the Cardinals don't want him anymore. I think that the teams in the league, there has to be a hidden belief, or maybe an internal belief around the league, that DeAndre Hopkins might not be on the front nine anymore. He's more on the back nine. And the back nine, golf reference, of course, but if you're on the back nine, that means your game's almost up. You're on the second half, and maybe he's on like the 14th hole rather than the 10th hole. Maybe that's what GMs and talent evaluators around the league believe. And I'm not quite saying that, but I will say these next 3 years, DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to get any faster. He's not going to get any stronger. They're right in terms of when a wide receiver is post 30, you're not going to see their best football anymore. So this is a very tricky decision that I think is going to take time for any team that eventually does sign him to really think this through and to make it a reality. If I was a betting man, I would say that DeAndre Hopkins does not end up on either the Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills. He goes to a team like Cleveland. He goes to a team like Detroit. He goes to a team that doesn't really have many receivers on that squad where he could make that team better. It's not that they have bad receivers. They just don't have one with the pedigree that he has. And is DeAndre Hopkins willing to be a number 2 to Stephon Diggs, willing to be a number 2 to Travis Kelce? I don't know. And I mean, the Ravens, even though they gave all that money to Odell Beckham Jr., maybe they'd kick the tires on him. It's not like they're really paying anybody else outside of Lamar and OBJ, right? So that's an option as well. That's a definite option as well. So D-Hop to Buff, question mark. I question whether this is actually going to happen, because if it was going to happen, I feel like it already would have happened, whether it was via trade or as soon as he became a free agent. Buffalo would have been waiting in the wings to sign him and make that happen. Now, there's fans in this camp of thought. Ken Zintel, he's a frequent commenter on the show. He said that he would sell the farm for a Super Bowl today, and I would as well, 100%. I understand that. It's just, will Brandon Beane sell the farm to do that? What definition is selling the farm? And that's always tough to do too, Ken. At this point, that expression, sell the farm, usually that can happen in March. But we're in June. We're not that far away from NFL training camp. So in terms of where the team is at, where the roster is at, the roster is almost set outside of whether they want to make an ad quite like this one. And I think a few factors need to happen in order for the Bills to make this decision. But big day for the franchise. They made a big decision today by re-signing and extending Ed Oliver. And it was one move that I was going to hop on here today and talk about the Bills a little bit here and there, talk about the Buffalo Bandits tonight, going to Game 3 in a little bit to see the Buffalo Bandits hopefully win the championship against the Colorado Mammoth tonight in Buffalo. But as I hop on here, I get this news. And this was, usually I have a good, a good ability to have my thumb on the page, right? As far as where this team is at, I did not see this coming. I will be completely honest with you and completely fair with you. Everything that I had heard was that they were going to give him a year, the last year of his contract, to then prove whether he should get an extension. But maybe with the whole Tremaine Edmonds situation, they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want to pull a Darcy Regier, if you will, or a Larry Quinn for Sabres fans out there, by testing that final year of a player's contract to see if he can fulfill his obligation. That player does, and then his market just explodes, and then he's gone. They didn't want that to happen, and maybe they're seeing him right now in OTAs and things like that. They're seeing how he looks physically. Maybe Ed Oliver's coming in here, and he looks better than ever. We haven't seen him yet in pads. We haven't seen him with the helmet on yet. That's something I'm going to keep my eyes on when I head out to St. John Fisher this year for the training camp, as far as Ed Oliver's physical preparation heading into what is a massive year prior to him with his new contract and playing up to that. So that's it. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I want to remind you guys that I got a few things going on with this show heading into next week. So, of course, as I mentioned, each and every Wednesday night at 8:00, I head to Twitter, and Twitter is an awesome place if you use it the right way. I'll say that. Using it the right way for the sports stuff that I do and everything like that, using it the right way, I'd say that obviously you go to @RyanThomasTake. That's my Twitter, @RyanThomasTake. If you haven't followed me on there yet, you should. Not only do I live tweet fights round by round, obviously Buffalo Bills games when the season's in full swing, hockey games, Sabres action and stuff like that, but I tweet takes and opinions and obviously retweet people that I appreciate in terms of the content that they provide. But Wednesday at 8, I'm doing something a little bit new. I want to have the opportunity to chat with other members of Bills Mafia that have followed this podcast since I started it about 6-7 years ago. And the best way to do that is with Twitter Spaces. And it's a cool forum where you can join in. I can invite you on as a speaker. You can hop in, ask me any questions. We can talk about any topic that you want, sports related, of course. And the whole show is recorded. So I could obviously get us to a point where we can interact with each other more. And PH Mike, I actually already kind of covered that in the beginning of the show. So when you go back, feel free to kind of chime in on that portion that I discussed. But I believe this move opens up a little bit, not much, but opens up a little bit for this year in terms of how they restructured this for just this season. The question is how much? That I don't know. But I do know that Ed Oliver's contract is a 4-year deal, $68 million, 45 of it guaranteed, which keeps him in Buffalo, obviously, for this year and then the next 4 after that. So definitely big news out of One Bills Drive. But I really look forward to chatting with you guys on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. A lot of topics to discuss. Last Wednesday, I talked to a few followers. We talked about coaches in the National Football League. We talked about some MMA, topics as well, and what's coming with that. Some big fights that were announced these last few weeks in boxing and mixed martial arts. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. And then you have, obviously, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, part 2 for the BMF title that the UFC is dusting off, pun intended. So, I'm really pumped up for what this summer provides. And whether it's baseball season, I'm a big baseball guy as well, but just in terms of the coverage that I'm going to be providing a lot of people here and the interaction, I want as much interaction as possible. I got a few events that I'll be going to where I'll be able to interact with some more members of Bills Mafia as well. And I'll be sure to document those trips and journeys and stuff as I kind of evolve this social media spectrum of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. I've been posting some funny videos, trying to get people, to laugh during their work day. And it's just been fun. I really enjoy this. I've really looked forward to just hopping on anytime some breaking news happens. Patrick Hughes states that Ed Oliver must be showing something at OTAs to get this deal. I completely agree. I touched on that. He might be in the best shape of his life, and we just don't know that yet. And if that's the case, bring it on. That's pretty awesome. So really looking forward to just a lot of things that this show provides, and I look forward to you guys being more of a part of it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Ed Oliver signs a 4-year, $68 million deal with the Buffalo Bills, an extension for $45 million guaranteed. Contemplating, debating, D-Hop to Buffalo, maybe, no, yes, as that sweepstakes continues to evolve over the course of the last week or so. So with that being said, I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Last and certainly not least, go Bills.